League of Legends is one of the most storied games in esports. It's had a pro scene since 2011, with independent tournaments like DreamHack or the legendary IPL series. But the real show started in 2013, with the kickoff of Riot's own tournament, the League of Legends Championship Series, or LCS. Given such a long and storied history, it can be daunting for new fans to get into the scene. Personally, I never followed League of Legends, so with Sentinels getting into the game in the 2026 season, and I assume many of Sen's Valorant fans, need a crash course in LCS history so that we have the proper context to understand what's going on. That's why we sought out an expert in the field.
Hey, I'm Julian Carr, better known on the internet as Pastrytime. I was a commentator for a long time in League of Legends for over a decade. Most of that time was in the LCS. Now I produce content for the same product for the LCS, and I also make content as well. I make some esports content on a little YouTube channel called the Esports Garage.
So with a true League of Legends historian to walk us through over a decade of League of Legends esports, let's dive into it and learn about the evolution of the NA LCS and see how Sentinels can establish the next era of the game. So getting right into it, what were the early days of the League scene like?
I first started watching competitive League in 2010. The first game I ever stumbled across was actually a World Cyber Games qualifier, which is like the Olympics of esports, kind of, that doesn't exist anymore. But it was basically a North American qualifier for this big international tournament. And that was Epic and CLG, with the two teams playing to win that one slot for North America. I remember IPL. I remember the legendary IPL, I think 3, IPL 5, IPL 3. I used to commentate tournaments between Korean and Chinese teams from my bedroom, where like a bunch of household names played before we had established leagues in places like North America and like South Korea. So it was definitely grassroots, a lot of players moving around. Teams were kind of like not real. Half of them had like no brand or like a joke brand they cooked up. And there's a couple of like teams as well, like everyone remember TSM and CLG, those were the big names. Dignitas had a presence then and still have a presence now. So there's a couple of like legacy orgs. Fnatic in Europe is another one that comes to mind as an early team into the League of Legends space. But for the most part, it was just like a bunch of friends playing games and kind of figuring it out and whatever tournaments were on offer. And they were mostly, things already at bigger events, things like DreamHack and stuff like that.
It's funny to think that something as massive as today's franchised LCS started out like all esports. Groups of friends making meme teams and trying to make a run through grassroots tournaments. Nowadays, every team in the LCS would have been considered a super team, with players imported from other regions, agents and orgs making deals to get the best roster available, and massive sponsors like Red Bull, Verizon, Samsung, and MasterCard. It's easy to see how someone could get nostalgic for these simpler times, but those simple times would quickly come to an end in 2013, when Riot launched their premier esports league in Los Angeles, the NA LCS.
I think before franchising, the scene had a lot of energy in it. It was really exciting. Like everyone kind of felt connected to that scene. But I think everyone, players especially, were really excited when Riot was going to start like an actual professional league.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is the day, the official start of the League of Legends Championship Series. This is a groundbreaking moment in league history as 8 North American teams take their first steps on the way to the Summoners Cup.
This was already the thing that these players wanted to do. They played, every single hour of every single day, playing solo queue. A lot of them streamed back in the early days, going to every tournament they could. So the idea of having competitive League of Legends every single week for, 10 weeks or so, an entire season of competitive gaming was something that, for me at least, hadn't really been a thing before. I'm sure other games had it before League of Legends did it, but as someone in my esports career, like that was the first time I'd ever seen, a truly organized league, certainly somewhere like the West. So I think a lot of people remember the era fondly. Lots of names that aren't around anymore, lots of interesting personalities, and just a very different vibe, like very much a DIY feel for something that was a professional esports league. So very much in its infancy, it didn't feel all that different. I think people were mostly excited to get the chance to watch and play League of Legends week in, week out.
So that's how League felt at the time. But what about the stories? Which teams dominated the early days of the LCS and established their brands as the teams to beat?
I think the early days of the LCS, everyone thinks of the same 3 teams. You certainly start with 2. You start with TSM and you start with CLG. CLG, as I kind of alluded to earlier, they are one of the original teams in the League of Legends space. This was initially a org. In fact, both TSM and CLG were orgs started by professional players. Obviously, they expanded out to be much bigger things than they were then. But these were, things started by players that people beloved at the time in the community, or at least that were very well known. These were players that streamed pretty prolifically. These are teams that broadcast a lot of their games before the LCS even started, so they would play in things like Go for LOL, which is the tournament series ESL ran every week, and they would stream those games. So TSM made guides online. That was the identity of TSM. That was the thing most people knew them for. They were a website to learn about League, not just a professional team. In fact, more people probably used their website than maybe watched the team, but I think those things probably correlated with each other. And CLG, they were the first team to go international, to win something major very early on in League of Legends. So these two teams just had a bunch of the legacy players. They've been around forever. They clearly started investing resources and energy into continuing those brands and those dominance. Along, though, very quickly in the early iterations of the LCS comes a little team called Cloud9. And Cloud9 are fun because they are, at the time, this upstart team. It's 5 friends that basically qualified through the qualifying circuit at that point. They'd actually tried to earlier under a different name, under Quantum, I believe, with a slightly different roster, and then failed to convert in the early qualifying stages of getting into the LCS. But eventually they made it through, rebrand to Cloud9, I think under the ownership of their still current owner, I believe, Jack Etienne. And they come in, they absolutely destroy their first 2 splits, they win back-to-back in a way that feels unprecedented. Their jungling is something that honestly influenced the world at the time, which is an impressive thing for a North American player. Their captain Hai in the mid lane was not only technically very proficient, very skillful, up against one of Europe and I guess now fondly North America's best mid laners in Bjergsen, but they're just heavy hitters. They're somehow a team that can contend with these 2 more established organizations, and they win instantly. So those teams just, for whatever reason, dominated the LCS. I think they had the pedigree, they clearly picked up the talent early, and I think they were just the teams that maybe took it most seriously, first off. They were always in contention, always a team you were excited about, and Cloud9 and TSM basically spent their time trading finals or wins for years and years and years in the early stages of the LCS.
They bottleneck into this fight and are going for broke. Hai goes in, tries to get his ultimate down. Last breath has already been used. Coming up with focus. Wow, Turtle! Turtle on the triple, Turtle on the quadra, Meteos on the outside, a second quadra on the playoff.
Yeah, teams that people really love to look back on fondly because, I mean, they're great teams, but also when you look at the history, just unbelievably good compared to the rest of the field, which I guess in the early stages of a league's lifespan doesn't really surprise me.
It's so funny hearing Pastrytime talk about how the early days were dominated by just a few teams. It almost directly parallels the early days of North American Valorant. You had Sentinels winning almost every tournament, but always meeting the same few teams domestically. Squads like TSM with players like Wardell and Subrosa, 100 Thieves with Hiko and Nitro, and FaZe with our old buddy Marv, and somehow current VCT rookie Baby Bay. But with the LCS, this kind of dominance was almost expected. You see, from 2013 to 2015, the LCS was comprised of only 8 teams, so there were only a few spots for pros, and the teams with the money and clout were few and far between. But that changed in 2015 when the LCS expanded to 10 teams.
He jumps on it, Ian Tonso, they pop it, and that's gonna be it. That's gonna be Curse Academy into the LCS for the 2014 Spring Split.
So in 2015, even though CLG are an absolutely beloved team, maybe the most loved team in the league actually, they have probably the most charismatic player that's ever played on the Rift for North America in Doublelift. They have him alongside Afromu, the legendary Rush Hour bot lane. This is a team that has done so much and done so well, but has never won a trophy. And it just feels like at some point it's maybe never gonna happen. So at the end of 2015, everything finally aligns and Doublelift gets to kind of exercise the meme from Reddit that he's never won a trophy. If you don't know, there was a long-running subreddit called Doublelift's Trophy Case that was just empty. There were no posts in the subreddit. It was something that was created a long, long time ago. I think before the LCS probably existed, and people would always link it when talking about Doublelift's accomplishments, because even though he was clearly a very good player, clearly someone that was capable of playing at the highest level, even internationally, he never won anything. And people would just constantly almost berate him with this subreddit, this fake subreddit, where he never won anything.
And they're gonna take a trip to Worlds. This is gonna be it. Counter Logic Gaming fighting every season since there has been one, and now taking down Team Solo Mid at Madison Square Garden to be your 2015 Summer Split champions.
So at the end of 2015, CLG finally break through and they win something. And then kind of the unthinkable happens after winning a trophy, and Doublelift betrays his longtime org and his bot lane partner and goes to TSM. And funnily enough, in 2016, so spring 2016, the start of that year, CLG and TSM meet again. And this time, CLG has a rookie bot laner, and Doublelift, of course, is on this kind of super team that TSM have maneuvered for themselves kind of in this part of the LCS. And the really funny part is that CLG win again with a bunch of rookies, with a team that I think no one thought would be able to get close to the final, let alone defend their trophy that they'd spent all this time building up towards. But from then on, it is the TSM show. 2016 and all of 2017 belong to TSM. It is close. I think it is closer than maybe history tells us if we just look at the results on the Wikipedia page. But this is stretch of TSM dominance in 2016, 2017. They've assembled, the super team. They've thrown as much money as they can to get all the best players, and it pays off. They become the first ever 3-time winner of the LCS, with Bjergsen and Doublelift basically banding together with a bunch of other really great players to smash the LCS and mostly make Cloud9 fans really sad. Cloud9, despite being a very successful organization, despite being in the finals many, many times, I think they're still the org with the most finals appearances of any LCS org. They do not win, and they just cannot beat TSM. 17 and moving towards franchising in 2018 is where it gets kind of interesting, because we're finally starting to see a couple of other organizations at least do something. It's still the same 3 organizations at the end of the day taking home the hardware. It's still often Cloud9 meeting one of CLG or TSM in the final, but there are teams like Immortals, the Wild Turtle eventually migrates to, that have a lot of success. They are the most dominant team in the regular season of the LCS for 2 splits in a row. They unfortunately can't convert in the playoffs. That is kind of the long-running tragedy, the long-running story of Immortals, but there's teams like Immortals where more money is coming in, new teams, new players are getting formed to try and compete with these other teams. And then there's a little team called Team Liquid, who's actually been around for quite a while. Team Liquid were a breakthrough team, probably the 4th, maybe 3rd, 2nd best team at times. You can see the competitiveness starting to rise. You can tell that the level of competition in the LCS, the seriousness that these orgs are taking it, the training schedules they have, the facilities they're building out, that's starting to bear fruit among teams that aren't named TSM, C9, and CLG.
This era would quickly come to a close in 2018 when Riot introduced franchising to the LCS, and everything would change.
So in 2018, when franchising rolls around, I don't remember the exact price that was kind of bandied around the media for one of these slots, but it was expensive. And the number of orgs, the number of people that were willing to put that much money into being part of a franchise league is kind of staggering to think back on now. And I think for me, when I look at franchising, the biggest impact it made were things like removing promotion relegation, giving teams a little bit more flexibility or a little bit more time to build these rosters and to try out players, because again, you don't have the danger of falling out of the league kind of over your head. We can look back on it now and say maybe a number of different things that are good and bad, but I think at the time, it seems like a net positive. Like, the thing you love is getting even bigger. So in 2018, I think people will mostly think of the same 2 teams, maybe for different reasons, but the original teams that we've talked about are still here. Those big 3, TSM, Cloud9, and CLG are all still around. They all obviously kind of made it into the first iteration of the franchised league. I think 100 Thieves is a team that actually springs to mind. They were pretty interesting, really exciting ownership at the time, very different from what the LCS had really seen. We hadn't had anyone really associated with FPS games into the space before. And the team actually ended up doing pretty well as well. They made finals in their first ever split, which is really rare for a new team. Unfortunately for 100 Thieves, despite being an org that I think a lot of people were excited about, especially from other games, they have the honor of, at the time, losing the fastest best of 5 in the LCS finals. And they lose it to none other than Team Liquid. Team Liquid absolutely do the unthinkable and then some in this era of the LCS. Not only do they assemble a Doublelift powered roster with 5 players that win the LCS, being the first team not named Cloud9, CLG, or TSM to ever win an LCS title, but they do it twice with that same roster, which is absolutely incredible. With TSM already having a 3-peat, I think people are pretty bullish on how this Team Liquid team is going to do, but it seems unlikely. Like, 3 already seems like a lot to win. 2 actually, weirdly, not that hard. Like, a lot of teams had won 2 in a row, and Team Liquid kind of being the next team to do that does feel like the payoff that an org that has invested so much time, effort, and energy into the league to kind of make. But doing it a 3rd time is ridiculous with a different roster, and then they do it again. Like, this 2018, 2019, if you just look at the winners, there's nothing you need to care about other than Team Liquid. They are so dominant in this era of the LCS. To have that much consistency with the same core 3 players is just incredible. I mean, Impact X Smithy Doublelift is one of the most impressive trios that a team has ever turned in, and that was the engine that powered Team Liquid to 4 titles in a row. So 2018, 2019, absolutely defined by Team Liquid's dominance. It is something I don't think we'll ever see again.
It's crazy how many parallels there are between the LCS and the VCT. When franchising hit both leagues, you saw a mad rush of orgs spending money and resources to fight for a spot. In the LCS, you had the same established teams fighting at the top, but then you had newcomers trying to make a big splash with the likes of 100 Thieves. But the whole world was unprepared for the next period to hit the LCS, the COVID era.
To me, the COVID era is defined by highs and lows. As a commentator, there is no worse feeling than not having energy to draw on in order to work when you're casting games. So being out of the arena, being at home, being in a very different environment was really challenging for everyone. The fact that there was even a league that players played in with a broadcast that got aired on many different places is like incredible. Like huge kudos to Riot Production and for the teams themselves for banding together to even have a league. There are many worlds where 2020 just doesn't have LCS at all in it, certainly in the first half of it, right? But the other side of that is actually some pretty interesting storylines. Cloud9 finally break through after, I think it's 5 years since their last win. Actually, no, it has to be longer than that. It's 6 years since their last win. And actually win with an incredible roster that dominates the entire spring. And it kind of sucks for them that they not only didn't get to go to MSI because there wasn't an MSI held that year due to the pandemic, but they kind of don't get the same like level of fanfare and celebration that they probably would have wanted if they were in an arena or at a big roadshow. So it's bittersweet in some ways because there's some cool things that happened in this era. Like again, some interesting teams win. There's like FlyQuest kind of finally building some powerful rosters and making back-to-back finals. That's really fascinating. TSM win again with kind of a young jungler. But after that, it starts to feel like teams that were looking to crack through actually start to emerge. A lot of things actually start changing in the LCS at this time. Legacy orgs start leaving. Eventually CLG becomes NRG. TSM leaves, which is not something we expected. Optic leaves. This is also the time where other teams start winning, which is nice. 100 Thieves wins the championship. NRG wins the championship. We start to get teams that aren't these legacy orgs breaking through and actually winning. Even NRG, despite kind of taking the mantle of CLG, also managed to have a really spectacular run and win a trophy for the first time for a lot of the players on their team in a really dramatic final. So the COVID era itself is just like some cool moments that is kind of marred by something greater than the league happening around the world.
I think we can all relate to the COVID years as being a little off, to put it lightly. I can imagine how bittersweet it would be to win a trophy only to have no fans to celebrate with. I mean, that's what happened with Sentinels when we won Masters Reykjavik in 2021. But, as Pastrytime mentioned, the other massive change to happen during and after COVID is that some of the iconic orgs start to leave the league. It's a time of transition in the LCS, so much so that even the LCS brand dies in 2025.
So 2025 is, maybe we'll look back at an interesting blip in the radar, not because exciting things didn't happen, but because the league goes through a rebrand. We go from the LCS to the LTA, the League of the Americas. There's this big push to have more international play between, Brazil, South America, and North America. And I think that in general is actually really cool. We get a lot of really cool moments of teams fighting kind of cross borders, which we haven't seen for a long time. We don't generally get that much of that in League, apart from MSI and Worlds. So I think the shift from the LCS to the LTA, obviously for a lot of the longtime fans of the LCS, probably felt a bit jarring. But apart from that, the feeling that maybe created, the storyline of this year is really honestly one of FlyQuest. 100 Thieves definitely have a really cool run. They start off the year really well. They actually continue their year shockingly well as a team. Cloud9 are still fighting as per usual. So a lot of familiar faces are still around, but this is the year where FlyQuest really just decided they're going to take over the league. TL had their time in 2024, losing barely to FlyQuest and winning in spectacular fashion to kick off the year. But from the end of 2024 to the rest of 2025, it is all FlyQuest all the time. This is not the team that originally kind of, won their spot in to the LCS and were kind of around maybe making some finals but never making waves. This org has new ownership, new management, a new logo, and clearly a very new idea about how they want to invest in this league, and it pays off massively for them. They win just about everything you can reasonably win, certainly in the LTA. They are, they like to tongue-in-cheek say they're the first and only LTA champions, which is true, because I don't think we'll ever get it back again. Maybe we will. But FlyQuest just go on almost a generational run here. Shades of TSM and Team Liquid past. I don't think maybe as impressive, although it's a little hard to tell because again, like how you weigh these trophies is a little different maybe, but certainly the quality of play they showed internationally and domestically, certainly the dominance they displayed domestically is super impressive, and that is a team that we may never see again in modern LCS. That is a really special team, and certainly they earned 2025 because they pretty much ran it over.
It's funny how League of Legends didn't see much international play between North and South America. We almost take it for granted in the VCT, since half the teams are South American squads. In fact, there have been rumors that Riot wants to split up the VCT so that South America can have their own franchise league. But regardless, the major storylines from the 1 year of the LTA seems to be one of FlyQuest's dominance. It looks like we at Sentinels are going to have our work cut out for us next year. So given that we're the new kids on the block in 2026, how can Sentinels make a splash in our inaugural year of the LCS?
I think if we chart the history of the LCS from 2013 to now, things are different. I think we want things to feel the same, and I think the vibes of the LCS certainly are worth recapturing. And I think Sentinels, the best thing they can do coming into the league as a new team is just make some sort of splash. And from what I can tell of Sentinels watching their Valorant games, watching a lot of their content, I think there's room for a brash team to at least be loud. And I think knowing what Sentinels have brought to other games, other titles, I think they can certainly do some damage. Whether you're a new Sentinels fan or an old Sentinels fan, a new League of Legends fan or old League of Legends fan, I think this is a team you should look to and just get excited about because they're going to make a splash. Good, bad, or great. I think Sentinels are going to do something really exciting.
So there you have it, a look back on the history of the LCS and a brief glimpse of what the future holds in 2026. As somebody who is part of Sen, I can tell you Pastrytime was right on the money. Rob is fond of a saying, be exceptional, whether it's good or bad, which echoes Pastrytime's advice. Thank you so much to Pastrytime for catching up all us League of Legends newcomers with the history. Make sure you check out the Esports Garage on YouTube to hear more about in-depth stories in the LCS.
It'll be great if you checked it out and see what we have on offer, because if you like League of Legends, you're probably going to like the channel.